What would you do if you were deep inside the jungle, far away from help, and you suddenly heard a scream that did not belong to an animal, but to a human? Who would rush to save a man when even the bravest hunters feared stepping close? Could the wild itself protect him when death was only inches away? The afternoon sun had just started to fade behind the tall trees of Madagascar's dense forest. Shadows stretched across the ground, and the air grew heavy with strange noises, rustling leaves, distant bird calls, and the sharp cry of a lemur swinging above. Deep inside that forest, a park ranger named Elias was moving carefully through the undergrowth. He was not a stranger to danger, but on this day something felt different. He had come looking for signs of illegal hunting, footprints, traps, anything unusual. His boots pressed softly against the wet soil, and the silence around him grew deeper with every step. Suddenly a chilling sound broke the quiet. A low, dragging hiss. Elias froze. His hand instinctively reached for the wooden stick he carried, his eyes searching the shadows. Before he could move back, something struck. A massive python launched from the tall grass with terrifying speed. Its thick, muscular body wrapped around his legs, coiling higher and higher. Elias gasped, dropping his stick, struggling to free himself. The snake tightened its grip, squeezing his chest so hard that his breath came out in broken cries. "Help! Somebody!" he shouted, though he knew no one was near. His voice echoed through the forest, desperate and raw. The python hissed louder, its mouth opening wide, fangs glistening. Elias clawed at the scales, but the snake was too strong. His heartbeat pounded in his ears as his knees gave way. For the first time in years of patrolling the wild, he felt his strength slipping away. But then, something unusual happened. Just as the ranger's voice broke the stillness, a group of shadows moved silently between the trees. Eyes glowed in the dim light. The forest's most cunning predator, feared even by many, had appeared. The Fossa. They crept closer, their lean bodies slipping through the grass, their tails flicking with sharp movements. One of them paused, ears pricked, listening to the ragged cries of the man. Another growled low and deep. They had never seen such a struggle before, an animal attacking a human. And yet, something in the chaos caught their attention, holding them there instead of running away. Elias gasped again, his body shaking, his voice weak. "No, no, please, help!" His eyes met the glowing stare of the nearest Fossa, and in that instant, fear and hope clashed inside him. Could these predators, these silent hunters of the night, do something no one had ever imagined? The jungle fell into an eerie silence. Only the tightening coils of the python and the faint whimper of the ranger broke the air. And the Fossas, they did not run. They watched. They waited. They circled. The question was no longer if Elias could fight back, but whether the most unlikely rescuers of the forest were about to do the impossible. The forest was holding its breath. Elias could feel the weight of the python crushing the air out of his lungs, every muscle screaming in pain. The coils pressed deeper, like a vice tightening with each second, leaving no room to move, no space to think. His vision blurred as sweat rolled down his forehead, dripping into his eyes. The hiss of the python was louder now, sharper, almost triumphant, as if the creature knew its prey had no escape. But something inside Elias refused to give in. His mind screamed at him to fight, to do anything that might buy him one more breath, one more moment. He clawed at the ground, his fingers digging into the dirt, trying to reach the stick he had dropped just a few feet away. His fingertips brushed the wood, but the python pulled tighter, dragging him back, the stick slipping out of reach again. His chest burned, every inhale shallow and ragged. That was when he noticed the eyes, dozens of them glowing faintly through the leaves. His breath caught not just from the snake's crushing grip, but from the sight of predators staring at him in silence. The Fossa. He had always respected their cunning, their stealth. But now they weren't hiding, they weren't hunting. They were watching him. At first Elias thought it was his fading vision playing tricks on him. But no, he could hear them now, their soft growls, the shuffle of their paws as they circled closer. One stepped into the light, its sleek, lean body low to the ground, muscles rippling with each silent step. Its amber eyes locked onto the python, not the ranger. The other Fossas followed, moving in a half-circle, cutting through the undergrowth. The python seemed to notice. Its head lifted, tongue flicking the air, body pausing for a brief second before tightening again around Elias. The snake's instinct was clear: protect its kill. But the Fossas were no ordinary disturbance. These hunters knew how to stalk, how to strike, how to work as one. Elias croaked out weakly, "Please, help me." His voice cracked, barely audible, yet the sound echoed strangely in the clearing. One of the Fossas tilted its head, ears twitching as though the desperate cry had stirred something. The leader, a larger Fossa with scars along its side, stepped closer. It let out a sharp growl, and in that moment the others seemed to understand. They split, slipping silently into different directions, closing in on the python from every side. The python reacted quickly, its head whipping around, fangs flashing, mouth wide open in a violent hiss. The sound ripped through the air, so sharp that even Elias felt the vibration in his chest. Yet the Fossas did not retreat. They lowered their bodies, tails flicking, teeth bared. The forest itself seemed to tremble at the confrontation, the old predator of coils against the agile hunters of Madagascar. And then, with blinding speed, the first Fossa leapt. Its claws sank into the thick, scaly body of the snake, scratching hard enough to make the python thrash violently. Elias felt the coils around him loosen for just a heartbeat, enough to gulp in a sharp breath of air that burned his lungs. But the python was furious now. It swung its body, slamming against the trees, trying to shake off the attackers. Elias was dragged roughly across the ground, his skin scraping against rocks and roots. Pain surging through him, another Fossa jumped in, biting down near the tail of the python, its sharp teeth tearing at the scales. The snake writhed and lashed, its power unmatched, but every time it shook one Fossa off, another would leap back. They were relentless, darting in and out with the precision of predators who had hunted like this for generations. Elias gasped, coughing violently as the coils loosened again. His ribs ached, his arms felt heavy, but he saw the chance. His hand crawled again toward the stick, fingers shaking. Just as he touched it, the python turned back, tightening its grip around his torso once more, crushing him to the ground. The stick slipped again, rolling just beyond reach. His vision dimmed at the edges, and fear whispered that this might be his last breath. But the fight around him had only begun. The scarred Fossa, the leader, launched itself directly at the python's head. Its claws raked across the snake's face, dangerously close to the eyes. The python thrashed, its body twisting violently. Trees shook as its massive form slammed into trunks, leaves, and branches, falling like rain. Elias was lifted off the ground and then slammed back down, the impact knocking the air from his chest again. "Please, God," he muttered, his voice broken as the chaos raged around him. The Fossas didn't stop. Their snarls echoed through the forest, blending with the furious hiss of the python. One of the younger Fossas made a mistake, lunging too close. The snake's head snapped sideways, fangs piercing deep into the animal's shoulder. The scream that followed cut through Elias's soul. The Fossa writhed in agony, pinned by the snake's mouth. For a moment Elias's heart sank. He had thought they were his only chance, and now one of them was caught, its body convulsing in pain. But what happened next shocked even him. The other Fossas didn't flee, they grew fiercer. As if the suffering of their own had unleashed a rage inside them. They attacked with greater force, two of them sinking their teeth into the python's midsection, shaking violently, ripping scales and flesh. The snake loosened its bite on the wounded Fossa, which stumbled free, limping but alive. Elias's mind spun. He had never seen anything like this. These weren't animals acting on instinct alone. This was something else, something coordinated, purposeful, almost protective. Why would they fight so hard? Why would they risk themselves for him, a human who had never belonged to their world? The battle raged on. The python twisted, its coils tightening and loosening in a desperate rhythm. Elias tried once more to grab the stick. This time his fingers clutched it tightly. With trembling arms, he raised it, smashing it down on the python's body. The wood cracked against the thick scales, but it wasn't enough to wound. Still, the strike distracted the snake, giving the Fossas another opening. The leader lunged again, this time clamping its jaws around the python's neck. It shook its head violently, tearing at the flesh. The python hissed in fury, its massive body slamming side to side, crushing branches, tearing vines from the trees. The ground itself seemed to shudder under its weight. Elias felt the coils around him finally loosen enough to pull one arm free. He gasped, dragging himself forward inch by inch, his ribs screaming with pain. The Fossas kept the python busy, their growls and strikes relentless, but just as Elias thought freedom was within reach, a chilling sound rose above the chaos. From deeper in the forest came another hiss, lower, heavier, darker. Elias's blood ran cold. His eyes widened in horror. Another python. He could see the second snake slithering through the undergrowth, its massive body glistening in the fading light, its tongue flicking rapidly. The first python was not alone. Elias's voice cracked with terror. No! No, please. Not another. The Fossas turned sharply, their ears twitching, their heads lifting toward the sound. They had fought bravely, but even they knew the danger had doubled. One python was a nightmare. Two could mean death for all of them. The leader Fossa released its grip on the first python, backing away slightly, snarling louder than before, warning the others. Elias felt his heart sink. His lungs ached. His body trembled. The forest was no longer silent. It was alive with the growls of Fossas, the hiss of snakes, the cries of the wounded, and the desperate heartbeat of a ranger who now understood that his fight for life was far from over. And in that moment, a terrifying question burned in his mind. If one python nearly killed him, what hope did he and the Fossas have against two? The forest, which only moments ago had echoed with the sounds of one battle, now trembled under the weight of an even darker threat. The second python slithered forward, its body as thick as a tree trunk, moving with terrifying calm. Its scales glistened wet under the last rays of dying sunlight, reflecting like black steel. The first python, though injured and bleeding from the Fossas' attacks, tightened its coils around Elias again, as if determined not to surrender its prey. Elias's chest constricted once more, his lungs screaming for air. He coughed violently, blood flecking his lips, his vision flickering between clarity and darkness. He had fought death before, injuries, wild animals, poachers, but never had he felt so close to being crushed alive. He could hear the rustle of leaves behind him, the sinister slide of the second python weaving through the grass. The Fossas shifted uneasily. Their growls lowered, ears pressed flat, eyes darting between the bleeding ranger and the new serpent. For a moment, it seemed they would scatter. Even the bravest predator knows when death is too close. Two pythons were not a fight any wild hunter sought. Elias's heart pounded harder at the thought. If they left now, he would die alone, silenced by the coils of the jungle's cruelest killers. But then, something unexpected stirred. The scarred Fossa, the leader, arched its back and let out a growl so deep it vibrated through the ground. The sound wasn't just a warning, it was a challenge. The pack, though tense, responded. They spread into a wider circle, tails flicking sharply, forming a barrier between Elias and the second python. The air thickened with raw tension. The second python's head lifted, tongue flicking, tasting the scent of blood, fear, and opportunity. It moved with slow precision, not rushing, not reckless. Its intelligence was clear. It had seen the struggle, knew the first snake was weakened, but it also knew the Fossas were bold. The forest seemed to hold its breath again as predator and predator locked into a standoff, and the ranger lay gasping in the middle, the unwilling prize of a battle he could never have imagined. Elias's mind spun with panic. He whispered hoarsely, Why are they still here? Why don't they leave me?" His voice was broken, his words lost to the chaos, but deep inside him, a flicker of hope grew. The Fossas hadn't abandoned him, and if they hadn't abandoned him, maybe, Just maybe, he still had a chance. The battle erupted before he could think further. The second python lunged forward, its body moving with terrifying speed. The ground shook as it struck, aiming not at Elias, but at the pack of Fossas standing guard. The leader leapt sideways, claws slashing at the snake's head. Others darted in, biting, snarling, darting back out again, before the serpent could wrap its coils around them. But this was no ordinary fight. Two colossal serpents against a small band of predators. It was chaos. The first python tightened around Elias, trying to finish him, while the second fought to claim ground. Elias's ribs groaned under the crushing force. His screams turned into choked gasps. He couldn't last much longer, and then, in the swirl of dust, leaves, and blood, a cry rang out, not from man or Fossa, but from high above. A hawk circled in the sky, its shriek piercing through the chaos. Elias's dimming eyes caught its shadow, gliding over the battle. For a split second, the forest seemed larger, alive with witnesses, creatures watching from trees, from burrows, from branches, all drawn to the impossible struggle unfolding in the heart of the jungle. The second python coiled, striking again. This time, it caught one of the smaller Fossas, wrapping its body around the predator's torso. The Fossa yelped in terror, clawing frantically at the tightening coils. Elias's chest ached, but the sound of the animal's pain cut through his own suffering. He forced his arm free, the stick still in his grip, though weak and splintered. Summoning the last of his strength, he swung. The stick cracked hard against the python's body, again and again. It wasn't enough to pierce the scales, but it startled the snake just enough for the trapped Fossa to squirm and slip free. Elias collapsed forward, panting, the stick falling from his hand as his strength bled out of him. The leader Fossa darted in, jaws clamping on the second python's tail. Another attacked its side. The snake hissed furiously, whipping its massive body side to side. The ground seemed to quake with the impact. Elias was dragged once more by the first python's coils, but now the serpent was weakening. Its blood stained the ground, its movements less fluid, less sure. But hope was fragile. With two snakes and several Fossas already wounded, the tide could still shift at any moment. Elias closed his eyes, whispering weakly, "Please, someone, anyone." And as if the forest had heard his plea, another sound drifted through the trees, the crack of branches, the faint echo of boots against the earth. Elias's eyes opened, unfocused, but his ears knew that sound. Humans, rangers, Elias. "Elias," a distant voice called, rough with urgency. His heart surged with faint relief. But then fear cut through him again. Would they reach in time? The pythons were raging beasts. The Fossas were fighting desperately, and he was seconds from blacking out. The first ranger burst into view, rifle raised. His eyes widened at the sight. Two colossal serpents, a battered comrade wrapped in coils, and Fossas fighting like warriors. His finger tightened on the trigger, but he hesitated. A single shot could hit Elias. The danger was unbearable. "Hold on!" the ranger shouted, voice cracking. More boots thundered behind him, more rangers spilling into the clearing, weapons drawn, eyes full of shock and fear. Elias's vision blurred again. He wanted to scream, to warn them, but his breath was too shallow. The leader Fossa snarled louder, circling tighter around the serpents as though guarding both Elias and the battlefield itself. It wasn't just a fight anymore. It was a storm of survival. Man, beast, and predator clashing in one impossible moment, and yet, in the chaos, another twist was rising. From the corner of his eye, Elias caught movement. Not a ranger, not a snake, not a Fossa. The bushes quivered, leaves shifting unnaturally. Someone else was watching, someone who did not belong. Poachers. The gleam of a rifle barrel flashed in the fading light. Eyes hidden in shadow followed the scene with predatory patience. To them, this wasn't a rescue. This was opportunity. The rangers were too focused on Elias, the Fossas, the snakes. None of them noticed the silent figures hidden just beyond the trees. Elias, barely conscious, did. His eyes widened in horror, his lips trembling with words that wouldn't come. The snakes were not the only threat. The jungle held darker hunters. The python's coils squeezed once more, dragging Elias closer to the brink of silence. The Fossas fought harder, their snarls blending with the screams of the forest. The rangers raised their weapons, torn between shooting and risking a life, and in the shadows the poachers lifted their guns, ready to turn survival into slaughter. The battle wasn't over. It was only growing darker. The clearing had turned into a battlefield where survival itself seemed to hang in the balance. The air was thick with dust, sweat, blood, and the raw violence of nature. Elias felt his ribs scream with each crushing breath, the first python's coils still refusing to loosen fully. His head spun in dizzy waves, but the sounds around him were sharp enough to keep his fading consciousness alive. The hiss of scales against soil, the guttural growls of Fossas lunging and retreating, the shouted commands of fellow rangers, and beneath it all, the low hum of a threat that had gone unnoticed. The poachers hiding in the shadows. The second python lashed violently, tail snapping like a whip, striking one of the younger Fossas across the side. The animal yelped, rolled across the dirt, but staggered up again, determined. Elias could see the loyalty in them, the way they refused to flee. Every time the snakes twisted, the Fossas twisted with them, attacking from angles too sharp for even the serpents to predict. They were fighters, yes, but there was something more in their eyes tonight, something Elias couldn't name. "Elias, hold on!" one of the rangers yelled, raising his rifle. His face was pale with panic, but his finger stayed tense on the trigger, unable to risk a clean shot. The coils around Elias made him the shield of the python itself. Any bullet meant for the snake could just as easily pierce his body. Elias tried to force his lips to move, to tell them not to shoot recklessly. But his voice cracked into nothing, a rasp lost to the chaos, and then it came, the faint click of metal, the unmistakable sound of a rifle being cocked in the shadows. Elias's heart dropped even as his chest was crushed. His eyes shifted sideways, trying desperately to warn his comrades. He saw it clearly. The outline of a man crouched low in the undergrowth, face hidden, weapon pointed not at the snakes, but at the rangers. Poachers. Elias whispered weakly, the word almost swallowed by the storm around him. The first shot fired. It didn't come from the rangers. A bullet whistled through the air, striking the ground near the boots of the nearest ranger. Dirt exploded upward. The man cursed, stumbling back, shouting, "We're under fire!" Chaos split into two directions now. The rangers turned sharply, some aiming toward the tree line, some still locked on the serpents. Shouts tangled with growls and hisses. The poachers didn't wait. More shots cracked through the forest, each one wild, ruthless. Birds erupted from branches, fleeing the violence. Elias felt despair crash over him. If the pythons didn't kill him, the bullets would. The Fossas froze for only a heartbeat, startled by the noise. But then, as though the gunfire only added to their fury, they lunged harder. The scarred leader clamped its jaws onto the first python's throat again, shaking savagely. Another tore at the second python's belly. The snakes writhed violently, but the Fossas no longer cared about caution. They fought like shadows made of fire. The rangers returned fire into the trees. Flashes of gun barrels lit up the darkness. One poacher screamed, struck, but others answered back with deadly force. The clearing was a nightmare now. Serpents thrashing, predators snarling, bullets slicing the air. Elias's body shook with each violent jerk of the snake. His hand, bloody and trembling, scraped against the dirt, searching desperately for anything, stone, branch, stick, that could help him. His fingers found a jagged rock. Weak as he was, he raised it with what little strength remained and smashed it against the coil near his chest. Once, twice again. The rock cracked against the scales, not enough to kill, but enough to weaken the snake's hold. Each strike burned the last reserves of his strength, but he refused to stop. Above him, the second python had grown distracted by the Fossas tearing at its flanks. It turned its massive head, jaws opening wide, and lunged at the scarred leader. The strike was blinding, but at the last second, another Fossa leapt into its path, taking the bite square in the side. Its scream tore through the clearing, and Elias's heart nearly broke at the sound. The sacrifice worked. The leader slipped free, counterattacking, its jaws sinking into the snake's jawline. The two locked in a savage struggle, a battle of claw and fang against scale and muscle. The Fossa's growls mixed with the serpent's furious hiss in a chorus that sent shivers through the trees. The rangers, pinned down by the poacher's gunfire, shouted back and forth. "We can't hit the snakes, Elias is too close," one yelled. "Focus on the tree line." The air was filled with chaos, nature and man locked in parallel wars, all within the same patch of forest. Elias, struggling to breathe, realized the truth. This wasn't just about his survival. The balance of the forest itself was at stake. The Fossas weren't only fighting for him, they were fighting for something bigger, though he couldn't yet see what. A bullet snapped through the leaves above his head, grazing the python's scales. The snake hissed louder, twisting madly. The rangers were caught in the crossfire, torn between saving their comrade and defending themselves. Then, out of nowhere, a sharp voice rose from behind the trees, not belonging to ranger or poacher. "Stop the fire!" For a moment, everyone froze. A tall figure emerged from the shadows. Not another poacher, not a ranger. An old man in ragged clothes, carrying nothing but a carved walking stick. His face was lined with age, his hair silver, but his eyes burned with a knowledge deeper than fear. He stepped directly into the clearing, his voice steady even as the snakes and Fossas clashed around him. The poachers cursed. One of them hissed, "That madman again!" Elias recognized him faintly. He had heard rumors of a hermit who lived in the forest for decades, a man who spoke of the animals as brothers, who claimed to understand their ways. Most called him crazy, but here he was, standing in the middle of hell itself. The man raised his stick, pointing not at the rangers but at the poachers. "Leave this place," he shouted. "You've cursed these grounds long enough." The poachers hesitated. Some laughed, mocking, but the old man didn't flinch. He slammed the stick against the earth. The sound echoed unnaturally, almost like thunder. The Fossas seemed to pause, their ears twitching as though they recognized the signal. Even the snakes jerked for a moment, their coils stuttering. Elias's mind spun. What was happening? The hermit's voice grew louder, carrying an authority that seemed to rise from the very soil. "This fight is not yours," he told the poachers. "The forest chooses who survives tonight." The rangers stared, confused, but they didn't fire. The poachers, however, raised their rifles again, unwilling to listen. But before they could shoot, a sudden chorus of growls erupted all around the clearing. From the undergrowth, more Fossas emerged. Half a dozen, then more. Their eyes glowed like amber fire, their bodies weaving into the battle with terrifying grace. The poachers faltered, their faces drained of color. "It's a trap," one muttered, stepping back. The hermit's expression hardened. "You cannot fight the wild when the wild itself has risen against you." The newly arrived Fossas leapt from the shadows, attacking not the snakes, not Elias, but the poachers themselves. Chaos exploded again, men screaming, rifles dropping, teeth sinking into flesh. The clearing had shifted once more, the battle no longer split. The balance had tilted. Elias, barely conscious, watched through blurred eyes. The snakes fought. The Fossas fought. The rangers struggled. And now the forest itself had turned into an army, defending one broken man, wrapped in the coils of death. But even as hope flickered, a darker thought gnawed inside Elias. If the Fossas had risen in such numbers, if the hermit's voice carried such power, then maybe the forest had not come to save him at all. Maybe it had come to test him, and tests in the wild were never without cost. The forest had fallen into a strange silence after the violent struggle. Broken branches lay scattered, leaves still trembling, as if the jungle itself had witnessed a war between life and death. Elias sat against a tree trunk, his shirt torn, chest heaving, mud smeared across his face. His hands shook as he tried to steady his breath, and though the python had slithered away, leaving behind its heavy trail in the soil, the terror still clung to him like a second skin. The Fossas lingered, circling slowly. Their amber eyes reflected the faint light, their tails swaying in steady rhythm. They had driven the python back, forced it to release the man when death was only seconds away. But just as Elias thought the danger had passed, a new sound cut through the forest. The sharp crack of a gun. His blood froze. Hunters. Through the shadows, two men appeared, rifles slung over their shoulders. Their boots crushed the undergrowth as they stepped closer, whispering to each other in low, hurried tones. They weren't looking for Elias, they were searching for the Fossas. Illegal hunters, chasing the very creatures that had just saved him. Elias's heart raced. His job as a ranger was to protect these animals, but he was weak, half-conscious, unable to even stand. He clenched his fists, frustration burning in his chest. He had lived his life teaching people that balance mattered, that every animal had a role. And now, fate had shown him that truth in the most brutal way. These predators, feared by many, had chosen not to harm him, but to save him. And humans, who should have known better, came with weapons to destroy them. One of the Fossas growled, low and steady, sensing the threat. The hunters raised their rifles, the cold barrels pointing at the shadows. Elias forced himself up, his voice breaking. "Stop, don't shoot!" The men froze, startled by the sight of a ranger, bloodied and barely standing. But their eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Move away," one of them spat. "These beasts are dangerous." "No," Elias shouted, his voice echoing in the silence. His legs trembled, but he took a step forward, spreading his arms wide as if his broken body could shield the Fossas. "You don't understand. They saved my life." The hunters exchanged glances, disbelief written across their faces. "Saved you? These things?" One laughed bitterly. "They kill livestock, attack villages. Why protect them?" Elias's eyes burned, his voice rising with a strength he didn't know he had left. "Because you only see their teeth, not their purpose. You see danger, but not balance. Tonight, when death was crushing me, it wasn't a man who helped me. It wasn't another human. It was them. You call them killers, but tell me, who is holding the guns right now? Them or you?" For a moment the jungle held its breath. The hunters lowered their rifles slightly, uncertain. The Fossas stayed motionless, watching, their instincts sharp, but their bodies still, as if they understood this was not their fight. Finally, one hunter cursed under his breath, lowering his weapon. "You're a fool, Ranger, but fine. Keep your pets alive for today." They turned, muttering, and disappeared into the thick woods, their footsteps fading into nothing. Elias collapsed to his knees, relief washing over him. The Fossas slowly approached. One came close enough that Elias could see the gleam of its eyes in the dim light. For a second, their gaze locked, man and predator, two lives that were never meant to cross paths like this. Yet they had. Elias whispered softly, his voice trembling, "Thank you. Thank you for proving me wrong, for proving all of us wrong." The Fossas, silent as always, melted back into the forest shadows, leaving Elias with the memory of what he had witnessed. Moral lesson, that night, Elias understood something that he carried for the rest of his life. True danger does not always come from the wild. It often comes from human ignorance. Every creature, no matter how feared, has a role in keeping the world alive. Sometimes help comes from where we least expect it, and sometimes the ones we fear the most are the very ones who can save us. When he returned to his village, bruised but alive, Elias told his story again and again. Not everyone believed him, but those who listened learned something unforgettable: respect the balance of nature. For when humans fail each other, the wild may still protect us. And deep inside Madagascar's jungle, the Fossas moved silently through the trees, guardians no one asked for, yet protectors in their own impossible way.